The villagers still remember the day the river died. It was the morning when the sun rose blood-red, casting an eerie glow over the village of Umuaka. Children ran to fetch water with their calabashes, laughing and chasing one another along the dusty paths. But when they reached the riverbank, they froze in silence. The once thundering river, the pride and lifeline of Umuaka, had shrunk into a thin, muddy trickle. Fish floated belly up, their silver scales dull and lifeless. Frogs croaked no more. The air reeked of something rotten, as though the water itself had given up on living. No one understood what had happened. The river had never run dry, not in drought, not in famine, not in war. It was the heart of the village, the source of every crop, every drink, every story told under the moonlight. To see it wither was like watching a mother bury her child. People whispered among themselves, their voices trembling with fear. And then the rumors began. They said it started 3 nights earlier, when the moon was full and the air smelled of palm wine and roasted yam. A group of hunters, emboldened by drink and pride, had gone down to the river in search of bushmeat. They carried lanterns, spears, and laughter that echoed too loudly against the water's surface. But when their lanterns swayed over the waves, something stirred beneath. She rose from the depths, glistening like moonlit ivory, her hair long and dark as the night, her eyes as deep as the river itself. Her voice was not a scream, nor a song, but something in between, something that made the men tremble without understanding why. It was the Mermaid of Umuaka, the guardian spirit that elders had spoken of for generations. They said she appeared only when the river was threatened, or when greed among men grew too heavy. The hunters should have run, but they did not. One of them, drunk on arrogance, hissed that the mermaid was nothing more than a witch. His name was Obina. He lifted his spear high, and before anyone could stop him, he drove it through her chest. She gasped, her voice shattering like a broken calabash, and the river roared louder than thunder. The hunters claimed the ground shook beneath them as she writhed in the water, blood turning the waves black. Her last words were carried by the wind, "You have silenced the river, and the river shall silence you." 3 days later, the river dried. The hunters returned with hollow eyes, none of them speaking of what truly happened. Obina, the one who had thrown the spear, was found dead in his hut, his skin cracked as though he had been left under the sun for 100 years. His tongue was swollen and black, his lips dry, though his wife swore he drank water before he slept. The other hunters, Chike, Ifani, and Nandi, disappeared one after another. Some were found floating in shallow pools, their mouths open, their throats filled with sand. Others simply never came back. The elders called it a curse. The younger ones whispered it was vengeance. Mothers wept because there was no water to cook, no water to drink. Men dug holes in the earth, hoping to find hidden springs, but all they uncovered were bones. Bones of creatures that should not have existed, with fins and claws tangled together. Then came the nights of haunting. Children began hearing voices near the dried banks. At first, it was soft humming, like a lullaby sung underwater. But soon the voices turned into cries, sharp and piercing, pulling at the hearts of those who listened. Some villagers said they saw her, the mermaid, crawling from the cracked bed of the river with her torn chest still bleeding. They said her eyes glowed like burning coals, and her hair dragged across the earth, wet though there was no water. One night, old Mama Neka, the village's oldest woman, confessed in a trembling voice that the mermaid was not just a guardian, but also a covenant. Long ago, the first settlers of Umuaka had struck a pact with her. The river would never dry, the crops would always grow, and the people would prosper, but only as long as no blood was spilled in the water. The hunters had broken that oath, and now the entire village was paying the price. But that was not all. Livestock began to vanish without trace. A goat tethered by the granary was found one morning torn open, its insides sucked out, no blood on the ground. Dogs howled through the night, staring at the riverbed as though something moved there in the darkness. Some swore they saw pale, webbed hands reaching out of the earth, clawing at the dust. Fear grew heavier each day. The river was gone, but the curse was only beginning. And still, no one dared to leave Umuaka, because those who tried never reached the next village. They said the road twisted into endless circles, leading travelers back to the dried river, no matter which path they took. The land itself had trapped them. Now, every night, as the moon rises, the people gather in silence, staring at the dead river, waiting. They know something is coming, something far worse than thirst. And deep in the earth, beneath the cracked mud and buried bones, the river murmurs faintly, like something still alive, something waiting to be reborn in fury. The curse did not wait long before it began to show its true teeth. The first to vanish was little Amaka, a girl no older than 7. She had gone to play with her friends near the dried banks, chasing a butterfly that shimmered strangely in the moonlight. Her friends swore they heard her giggling, running ahead of them, but when they caught up, only her small footprints were pressed into the mud, leading straight into the cracked earth of the riverbed, where no child could have gone. The prints stopped abruptly, as if she had been swallowed whole. Her mother's screams that night tore through the village like thunder. The next was Papa Chidi, an elder who had lived long enough to see 3 generations grow under his roof. He had sat outside his hut in the cool evening, chewing kola nut and humming softly to himself. His sons later found him slumped in his chair, his eyes wide open, his body stiff, and his throat filled with damp black sand. His lips were parted as though he had been gasping for water that never came. The kola nut pieces were still in his hand. Panic gripped Umuaka. People locked their doors at night, whispering prayers in trembling voices. The priests of the shrine offered sacrifices, goats, chickens, even a ram, but the blood spilled on the altar seemed to dry instantly, as though the earth itself was thirstier than the gods. Some said they heard the laughter of the mermaid in the distance, faint and mocking, drifting across the silent riverbed like wind. Then came the night of the voices. It began with Ngozi, a woman heavy with child, who woke screaming that someone was singing inside her hut. Her husband lit a torch and found nothing. But the singing did not stop. It was a soft, mournful melody, like a mother rocking her baby beneath the water. Soon, other families reported the same. The voices spread from hut to hut until the whole village echoed with that watery lullaby. No one could sleep. Mothers pressed their children close, men gripped their machetes with sweaty hands, but the song seeped into their ears and hearts like a poison. Some villagers claimed they understood the words. They said the song was a warning. Return what was taken, or be taken, or be taken. Fear gave way to madness. Namdi's wife, in desperation, took her newborn to the dried riverbed and laid the child there, begging the mermaid to take him instead of cursing the whole village. The child was gone by morning, no cries, no blood, no trace, but a single strand of wet, black hair coiled around the baby's blanket. The land itself began to betray them. Maize fields withered overnight. Palm trees bled a dark, sticky sap when tapped. Even the air turned heavy, pressing on chests, making it hard to breathe. Dogs barked at shadows that no one could see, then dropped dead, tongues swollen, as though they had drunk poison, and yet no one could leave. One evening, Chike and his family packed their belongings and set off on the old footpath toward Mbano, the next village. Hours later, people heard pounding on the village gates. When they opened it, Chike and his family were standing there trembling, clothes torn, eyes wide with terror. They claimed they had walked for 2 days straight, but every turn of the road curved back to Umuwaka. No matter how far they went, the land spun them in circles, delivering them again and again to the dead river. By now, everyone knew the truth. The mermaid had not only cursed their water, she had trapped their souls. And still, every night, the riverbed grew noisier. Cracks widened as though something pushed from beneath. At times, villagers swore they saw water bubbling up, but it was not clear water. It was dark, thick, and red. And from deep below, voices rose, many voices, not just the mermaids. Voices of the drowned, the stolen, the damned. It was only a matter of time before something clawed its way back to the surface. That night the moon rose swollen and red, hanging over Umuwaka like an evil eye. No one slept. The villagers gathered at the edges of the riverbed, clutching torches, their faces pale with fear. The ground beneath their feet trembled faintly, as if a giant heartbeat thudded inside the earth. Children clung to their mothers. The men, though armed with machetes and spears, looked like hunters facing a beast they could not see. Then it began. The cracks in the river widened with a groaning sound, splitting the mud open as if the land itself was tearing apart. From within, a hand shot upward pale, webbed, dripping with something black and slimy. It clawed at the air, dragging itself out, followed by another hand, then another. Soon half a body emerged, a twisted thing with the upper half of a woman and the lower half like fish scales melted into rotten flesh. Her eyes glowed red, her mouth stretched too wide, lined with jagged teeth. The people gasped it was the mermaid, or what she had become. But she was not alone. Dozens of smaller shapes clawed their way out beside her. They looked like children, their bodies dripping wet, though no water remained, their eyes hollow and glowing faintly. Some had gills on their necks, others had long, sharp nails that scraped the earth. Their voices were whispers, high-pitched and broken, calling names of villagers who had already been taken. Amaka, Papa, Chidi, the baby the crowd screamed. Mothers dragged their children back. The hunters raised their spears, but before they could act, the mermaid lifted her head and let out a sound so shrill and piercing that the torches flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the village, save for the glow of her eyes and those of her ghastly brood. In the pitch black, the whispers turned to laughter. One of the hunters, Ifani, lunged forward, his spear aimed at the creature. In the flash of his torchlight, people saw her hand dart out faster than a striking snake. She caught his spear mid-air and shoved it back with unnatural force. Ifani's body flew across the riverbank and landed with a sickening crack. He did not rise again. Panic erupted. People scattered, tripping over each other, but the riverbed seemed to stretch and twist, paths vanishing in the dark. The villagers found themselves running in circles, always back to the edge of the cracked earth. No matter where they turned, the mermaid and her brood were always there, waiting, whispering, laughing. And then something else rose from the river. At first it looked like water spilling upward, defying gravity. But the liquid was thick, black, and crawling with movement. It formed a towering shape, taller than the palm trees, with eyes like fiery coals burning through the dark. It was not. The mermaidette was older, darker, a thing that had slumbered in the depths for centuries, now awakened by her blood. The ground shook with each rumble of its voice. Umuwaka has broken the covenant, and Umuwaka shall be devoured. The people fell to their knees, wailing, some begging for mercy, others frozen in terror. The air itself felt heavier, pressing down on lungs, suffocating them. And from the cracks in the river, more figures clawed their way out, hundreds of them, some human, some beast, some so twisted no words could describe them. The curse was no longer a whisper. It was here, and Umuwaka had nowhere left to run. The screams of Umuwaka carried into the night, but the land swallowed them like a greedy beast. Families clung to one another, yet still the shadows dragged them apart. The first family taken was Ize's household. Neighbors later swore they saw a swarm of small, wet hands slip under the cracks of his hut and pull the door open without a sound. Ez, his wife, and their 2 sons were dragged out, their nails scratching furrows into the earth as they screamed. By the time other villagers arrived, the hut was empty, only a trail of black water left behind that hissed and steamed when touched. Every night after, another family disappeared. The creatures did not always come as monsters sometimes. They came as voices. Mama Udu woke one night to hear her late husband calling her name. Trembling, she stepped outside, convinced he had returned. The next morning her hut stood open, her bed empty, and her footprints led straight into the riverbed where they ended in the cracks. The more the village resisted, the worse the curse became. Torches refused to burn. Yams rotted in their barns overnight. Even the sky betrayed them, clouds forming heavy with rain but never releasing a drop. Children cried endlessly, but their tears dried before reaching their cheeks. It was as though water itself had been banished from Umuwaka. Yet in all the despair, a whisper of hope flickered. One evening, Mama Neka, the oldest woman in the village, summoned the people to the shrine. Her hands shook as she leaned on her staff, her eyes clouded with age but burning with urgency. She revealed that long ago the ancestors had made not one, but 2 covenants with the mermaid. The first was to never spill blood in the river. The second was hidden, spoken only to the eldest of each generation. If ever the covenant was broken, there remained one ritual strong enough to appease the guardian spirit, but it demanded a sacrifice. The people leaned closer as she spoke. They would need to find the heart of the river, a stone said to lie buried beneath the very riverbed now cracked and cursed. To awaken it, a life pure and untainted by greed must be offered the life of a child. Only then would the river breathe again, sealing the darkness that had been unleashed. The villagers gasped, horrified. Hadn't they already lost too many children? Mothers clutched their sons and daughters tighter. But the ground shook again, and from the distance came the sound of many voices crying, wailing, growing louder as though the river itself was marching toward them. Mama Neka's voice cracked as she added, "If we do nothing, no child, no mother, no man will remain. Umuwaka will be swallowed whole. One innocent life is the only bridge to save us." The villagers argued until their voices broke. Some shouted that the old woman was lying, that no child must be given. Others, desperate and thirsty, began to eye the little ones among them with trembling dread. The night stretched long, filled with anger, tears, and fear. And all the while, from the dead riverbed, came a sound-scraping dragging louder than before, as though something immense was clawing its way to the surface. The curse would not wait much longer. The choice tore Umuwaka apart. Mothers screamed, fathers fought, and children clung to their parents as if their lives depended on which they did. But the river gave them no time. That night, the earth cracked open wider than ever before, and from the depths rose the monstrous figure that had haunted their nights. The twisted mermaid led the brood of drowned children, her bleeding chest glowing with an unholy light. Behind her, the towering black shadow with coal-red eyes rumbled like thunder, each word shaking the huts to their foundations. Choose or be devoured. The people fell to the ground, wailing, paralyzed. And then, through the screams, a small voice rose. I will go. Every head turned. It was Kelechi, Mama Neka's own grandson. He was barely 10, but his eyes were steady, braver than the men clutching spears. He walked forward calmly, slipping from his mother's desperate grasp. His voice carried in the silence. If one child must go for the river to live, let it be me, better one than all. The villagers broke into sobs. His mother fainted. Even the creatures paused, their glowing eyes fixed on the boy. Mama Neka staggered forward, clutching her staff, tears streaming down her face. She tried to stop him, but Kelechi only smiled at her, a sad, soft smile. Grandmother, you always told me the river gives life. Let me get it back. The elders, trembling, led him to the cracked riverbed. Mama Neka began the old chants, words passed from ancestors long gone. The air thickened, the ground rumbled, and the boy stepped into the center of the fissure. The moment his small hands touched the earth, the black shadow roared, and the mermaid shrieked with a voice like shattered glass. The brood wailed, vanishing into mist as if burned. Then came silence. The cracks filled, not with blood, but with water clear, rushing, alive. It burst upward with a force that drenched the villagers, who fell to their knees in awe. The river returned, stronger than before, its roar echoing with power. Fish leapt joyfully from the waves. The land breathed again. But Kelechi was gone. The people searched, calling his name, but only the river answered, carrying his laughter in its ripples. Mama Neka fell to the ground, her cries louder than the river's roar. Yet in her grief, she smiled faintly through her tears, for she knew the covenant had been renewed. From that day, the river of Umuwaka flowed endlessly, bringing life to the village again. The curse was broken, the monsters banished, and the land healed. But the memory of Kelechi remained. Every year, when the river swelled fullest, the people gathered to sing his name, tossing flowers into the current. Some swore they saw a small figure playing in the water, laughing, his spirit forever guarding the village. The tragedy bound Umuwaka together. They never forgot the covenant again. And they never forgot the boy who became the heart of the river.